I'm Cassandra Reid, 35 years old, a marine researcher who's spent years studying ocean ecosystems. My grandparents left me their waterfront house bordering Olympic National Park in Washington, my anchor between expeditions. After 18 months away in Maine, tracking coastal erosion, I came back to Seattle for a family dinner. My sister stood up, grinning, and announced, "The house sold for $500,000. My family clapped, calling it a brilliant move. I snapped, "How dare you?" Before I could finish, she slapped me, shoved me toward the door, and hissed, "Get out, loser!" Everyone froze, but I stayed calm, knowing the property was locked under federal conservation laws. The next morning, my phone lit up with 25 missed calls in 30 minutes. Her voicemail shook. They caught me. I leaned back, voice steady, and replied, "Too late. Loser." What she didn't know was the legal trap waiting to snap shut. Want to know how her scheme unraveled? Do you think I should forgive or walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments because sometimes one small decision can change an entire life. Looking back to 18 months ago explains why I stayed so calm during that family dinner. My family had been pressuring me for years to mortgage the property in Washington to fund their real estate ventures. My sister led the charge, always arguing that the land was wasting potential near prime coastal development areas. I refused, every time, knowing the federal easements protected it as critical marine habitat for endangered whales. But she wouldn't stop, especially after her investments tanked. She lost big on cryptocurrency trades and a failed cafe business, leaving her in deep debt. Dad and Mom covered some losses, but she needed more. "Just sign the mortgage papers," she demanded during one visit to Seattle. "It's family helping family." I saw her desperation and decided to turn it against her. I pretended to agree, saying I'd consider a preliminary contract with investors she knew. In reality, I contacted my old college friend Travis Coleman, a real estate lawyer based in Seattle. He reviewed the documents and confirmed the easements made any mortgage or development deal illegal without federal approval. This could be a setup, Travis advised over coffee. If she forges anything, we report it immediately to prevent escalation. We drafted a plan where I gave vague verbal consent but never signed official papers. Travis prepared reports for environmental agencies, ready to file if she crossed the line. My sister jumped at my fake compliance, thinking she'd won. She started contacting investors, promising quick returns on coastal property. I documented everything, emailing Travis copies of her messages. Meanwhile, I strengthened the property's protections by submitting new data on whale migration patterns to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They added stricter designations, making any unauthorized deal a clear violation. As my main research trip approached, I knew she'd act while I was gone. Travis agreed to monitor the property records remotely. "If she files a fraudulent mortgage or contract," he said, "we'll catch it early and alert the authorities." The easements weren't just paper, they were my weapon, binding the land to perpetual conservation. No investor could touch it without triggering reviews. My grandparents had enrolled it decades ago for tax benefits, but it locked out development forever. I left for Maine confident that her scheme would backfire through legal channels alone. That pressure from my sister didn't start recently. It rooted back in our childhood in Seattle, growing up in the suburbs there. Our family was all about real estate deals and flipping properties for profit. Dad led the business, buying up land to turn into condos or malls, while Mom handled the paperwork and client meetings. They raised us to value money and success above everything, pushing us toward careers that paid well. My older sister, Deborah Vaughn, fit right in from the start, helping Dad with open houses as a teen and later joining the firm full-time. She thrived on closing deals, always talking about market trends and investment returns. Lori, my younger sister, followed suit. studying business in college and interning with them during summers. But I was different. From early on, I spent weekends exploring the beaches near Puget Sound, collecting shells and watching tide pools instead of attending property viewings. My parents dismissed it as a phase, saying, "You'll grow out of it and get a real job." They mocked my interest in marine biology, calling it playing with fish when I brought home books on ocean conservation. Family dinners often turned into lectures about how my hobbies wouldn't pay the bills. "Look at Deborah," Mom would say. "She's already making commissions." Dad nodded, adding, "We need practical skills in this family." After high school, I pursued a degree in marine science, which they tolerated but never supported. Holidays brought arguments about my impractical choices, with Deborah rolling her eyes and Lori staying quiet. I volunteered at local aquariums, learning about coastal ecosystems, but they saw it as time wasted. Then came the inheritance 7 years ago. Our grandparents passed away within months of each other, leaving their waterfront house in Washington to me specifically. The place bordered Olympic National Park, with direct access to protected coastal areas. My family was furious, expecting to sell it and split the proceeds. "It's prime land," Deborah argued at the reading of the will. "We could develop it into vacation rentals." But I visited and fell in love with it, remembering how grandparents taught me to identify sea stars and monitor kelp forests. They had always emphasized preserving the coastline while settling the estate. I discovered the federal easements on the property. Buried in the deeds were agreements from decades ago, enrolling the land in perpetual conservation programs in exchange for tax breaks. They had restricted any development to keep it as habitat for endangered whales that migrated through the waters. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had designated it critical for species like gray whales, requiring federal review for any changes. This meant no mortgages or contracts without agency approval, as it could violate environmental laws. I kept it quiet at first, knowing my family would fight it. Over time, I submitted more data on whale sightings, strengthening the protections. I added observation equipment near the shore, documenting migration patterns for reports. Deborah's troubles escalated about 3 years ago. Her side investments crashed, first cryptocurrency that tanked. Then a boutique she opened that closed after 6 months due to bad location. She racked up debts, and our parents bailed her out partially. But she needed more. "Let me handle a mortgage on the house," she pressed during a visit. "It's sitting there unused while I'm drowning." I refused outright, citing maintenance costs, but she kept pushing, even suggesting preliminary contracts with her investor contacts. Family meetings turned tense, with Dad backing her up. "It's for the business," he said. Mom added, "Think of your sister." Lori tried mediating but sided with them. I stood firm, knowing the easements made her plans impossible. As her desperation grew, I suspected she'd try something shady, especially with my long trip to Maine coming up. She started networking with developers, hinting at access to the property. Deborah's attempts didn't stop with those visits. They escalated as her debts mounted higher. She began calling daily, leaving voicemails about how the mortgage could clear her slate. I deleted most without responding, focusing instead on my work. One evening, she showed up with a stack of forms from her investors, insisting I review them. "It's just a preliminary step," she said. I scanned the documents and handed them back, stating firmly that I wouldn't sign. She accused me of hoarding the property out of spite. But I explained it was about honoring our grandparents' wishes. The conversation ended with her slamming the door, vowing to find another way, to safeguard the site further. I ordered specialized gear for my marine studies, underwater sensors for current patterns and acoustic recorders for whale sounds. Growing them up required coordination with local conservation groups, who helped position everything without disturbing the habitat. The installation took weeks, involving trips to the house where I tested connections and calibrated data logs. I also consulted technicians for secure remote access, ensuring I could monitor from anywhere. Dad pulled me aside during a family barbecue, suggesting I reconsider. "Deborah's in over her head," he confided. Mom overheard and joined in, saying, "A little flexibility could save her business." Lori watched from afar, not intervening. I reiterated my stance, mentioning the easements in passing, but they waved it off as minor hurdles. Deborah's investments continued failing. Her latest venture, a real estate flip in downtown Seattle, fell through when buyers backed out. Creditors started calling her office, and she turned to me again for help. "One signature," she pleaded over lunch. I refused once more, citing the legal binds. She left frustrated, but I sensed her planning something behind my back. With the main project looming, I scheduled a meeting with Travis at his office. He examined recent title searches and noted unusual activity from her contacts. "We should reinforce your position," he recommended. He drafted notices to send to potential lenders, warning of the easements and potential violations. If anyone proceeded without approval, we'd report it to the proper channels right away. Travis also advised updating my insurance to cover any unauthorized access. "This protects against claims," he noted. I agreed, signing the forms he prepared. We discussed contingency plans for quick legal action as departure neared. Deborah made a last-ditch effort at Mom's birthday dinner. "Let me connect you with my investors," she offered. I declined politely, explaining the restrictions again. She rolled her eyes, but I caught her exchanging glances with Dad before flying out. I met Travis one more time to transfer monitoring access. He took detailed notes on the property setup and promised regular checks. "Any sign of improper filings, I'll alert the agencies," he assured. The 18-month assignment in Maine involved daily fieldwork on erosion sites, but I kept tabs through secure apps. Travis's updates came steadily, confirming quiet at first. Then subtle signs emerged, queries from lenders tied to Deborah's network. I prepared for the inevitable, knowing the easements would block any move. 2 days after that dinner, I drove to the house in Washington to check things firsthand. The trip from Seattle took a couple of hours, and when I arrived, yellow survey flags dotted the shoreline near the property line. They marked spots for potential docks or expansions, clearly from investors scouting the site. I pulled out my phone and took photos of every flag, noting their positions relative to the easement boundaries. I also documented tire tracks from recent vehicles and collected business cards left by the crew, back in the car. I called Travis and described what I found. He listened quietly before responding that it matched the lender queries he'd flagged. "This confirms unauthorized activity," he said, without delay. Travis contacted the local police department, filing a report for suspected property fraud. He included copies of the easements and my ownership documents, emphasizing the federal protections. The officers took it seriously, promising to investigate the survey company's involvement. By afternoon, Travis forwarded me confirmation that the report was logged, with referrals to state real estate regulators. He also notified the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about potential easement breaches. The investors, a couple from Portland looking for coastal flips, soon realized the deal was bogus. Their lawyer reached out to Travis after discovering the preliminary contract Deborah had pushed lacked my signature. They demanded explanations. And when Deborah stalled, they filed a civil lawsuit for misrepresentation and breach of contract. The suit sought damages for their time and expenses, plus punitive fees to deter future scams. They attached evidence of her promises, including emails and meeting notes. Deborah's phone started ringing off the hook from her creditors and the investors' team. She left frantic messages for Dad and Mom, but they couldn't help much. The lawsuit papers arrived at her office the next week, listing me as a witness. Travis advised me to provide affidavits detailing the easements and her unauthorized actions. I complied, sticking to facts without emotion. As the case built, Deborah's business partners distanced themselves, canceling joint ventures. One evening, my phone buzzed with her number. I let it go to voicemail at first, but curiosity won. Her voice cracked as she spoke. They caught me. She begged for me to vouch that I'd approved the contract verbally. I texted back 3 words, too late. Loser. The message felt final, cutting off her pleas. Travis updated me that the police had interviewed the survey crew, who admitted working on Deborah's referral without verifying ownership. Regulators opened their own probe into her license status. The investor's suit gained traction, with a court date set for preliminary hearings. Deborah tried rallying the family, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But Lori expressed doubts after reviewing the basics. Dad attempted to negotiate with the investors privately, offering settlements from his funds, but they refused, wanting full accountability. Mom worried about the publicity hitting local business networks. Through it all, I stayed detached, letting the process unfold. Travis handled my side, ensuring my statement supported the facts. The easements held strong, blocking any claims on the property. As word spread in Seattle's real estate circles, Deborah's reputation took hits, with clients pulling out of deals. Colleagues avoided her at industry events, and online reviews mentioned the ongoing dispute. A week after the lawsuit filing, Dad texted me to come over for an urgent talk. When I arrived at their Seattle home, the whole family waited in the living room. Mom sat twisting her hands. Lori paced by the window, and Deborah looked exhausted with puffy eyes from stress. Dad started right away, explaining they'd heard from the investor's lawyer demanding settlement. "We can fix this together," he said. Mom chimed in, describing how the news was spreading among their clients. Deborah cut to the chase, admitting she'd pushed the contract too far. "Just tell them you were okay with it," she urged. I shook my head, reminding them the easements made it impossible legally. Lori suggested a family mediator, but I pointed out that wouldn't change the facts. Dad offered to pay part of the damages from his savings if I withdrew as a witness. "It's about unity," he pressed. Mom nodded, saying the business couldn't survive the scandal. Deborah promised to cut ties with those investors if I helped smooth things over. I listened as they outlined plans to counter the claims. Travis had warned me about this kind of pressure, so I called him on speaker. He joined the conversation remotely, outlining the suit's progress. "The court has scheduled depositions," he explained. He recommended sticking to the process, as pulling back now could raise suspicions. "Continuing the civil action ensures accountability," Travis added, noting the investors sought full reimbursement plus legal fees. Dad argued it was excessive, but Travis countered that misrepresentation in real estate carried standard penalties. I agreed with him, stating I wouldn't interfere. Deborah grew agitated, accusing me of enjoying the fallout. Mom tried calming her, but the room tensed. Lori asked if there was any compromise, like a partial statement. Travis advised against it, saying half measures could complicate my position. He detailed potential outcomes, including asset freezes if ignored. I ended the call and faced them directly, refusing to budge. "This started with unauthorized actions," I said. The meeting dragged on with more pleas, but I held firm. By evening, Deborah received notice of the first hearing date. Her phone pinged with emails from partners questioning her ethics. One major client canceled a project, citing the ongoing dispute. Dad's firm lost a referral network contact who'd heard about the case through industry channels. Mom mentioned neighbors whispering at their club events. Deborah's social media filled with subtle unfollows from professional connections. The local real estate association launched a review of her practices, threatening suspension. As the suit advanced, witnesses from the survey team submitted statements confirming her instructions. The investor's lawyer pushed for discovery, uncovering her financial records. Deborah's attempts to settle privately failed when they insisted on public acknowledgement. Family friends stopped inviting them to gatherings, wary of association. Dad's deal slowed as lenders hesitated. Mom avoided her usual social circles, embarrassed by the gossip. Lori's internship offers dried up due to the family name. Deborah faced mounting bills from her own lawyer, dipping into savings. The court granted a motion for summary judgment on key points, favoring the investors. Media outlets picked up the story as a cautionary tale in Seattle business news. Deborah's license came under formal scrutiny, with hearings scheduled. The family's reputation suffered irreversible damage in their tight-knit community. Creditors tightened terms on existing loans, adding financial strain. 3 months after the initial court motions, the judge delivered the verdict against Deborah. The investors won on all counts, with the ruling highlighting her deliberate misrepresentation of the property's status. She had to pay back their full advance, plus interest, totaling over $200,000 in restitution. The court also imposed additional fines for violating state real estate regulations, draining what remained of her accounts. Deborah appealed immediately, but her lawyer warned the chances were slim given the evidence stack. In the meantime, she liquidated personal assets, selling her car and downsizing her apartment to cover the immediate payments. The association revoked her professional certification after their review, barring her from practicing for 5 years minimum. Former colleagues stopped returning her calls, and job applications went unanswered as word circulated. One investor posted a review on industry forums, detailing the ordeal without naming her directly, but leaving enough clues for insiders to connect the dots. Deborah's social circle shrank overnight. With invitations to networking events vanishing, she spent evenings alone, scrolling through profiles of people who distanced themselves. Dad's firm felt the ripple effects first. Longtime partners hesitated on joint projects, citing concerns over liability. One major contract fell through when the client referenced the case in their withdrawal letter. Revenue dipped by 30% that quarter, forcing him to lay off staff and cut bonuses. Mom's community groups whispered behind her back, and she stepped down from a board position to avoid awkward questions. Lori's career stalled too, with recruiters pulling offers after background checks flagged the family connection. The once close unit now met rarely, conversations strained by unspoken blame. I watched from afar, receiving updates through public records rather than direct contact. Travis handled the final witness confirmations, ensuring my affidavit stood unchallenged. With the case closed, I blocked their numbers one by one, starting with Deborah's. No more pleas or accusations reached me. I relocated my base to a small rental near the Maine coast, diving deeper into erosion studies without distractions. Weekends brought solo hikes along protected shores, where I analyzed data undisturbed. Professional networks expanded as I presented findings at conferences, free from family ties pulling me back. The house in Washington remained secure, its easements intact against future threats. Conservation groups praised the outcome, using it as a case study in their workshops. Protecting personal boundaries meant saying no without guilt, even to blood relatives. Valuing the environment taught me resilience, turning potential loss into lasting strength.